Hey everybody, thank you so much for listening to our Big Time Talker podcast. I'm Burke Allen. We are live at the American Library Association's annual conference and exhibition in beautiful Chicago, talking to authors from all over the country. And the show is brought to you by our friends at SpeakerMatch.com, the world's largest online speakers bureau. Joining us in the glass-enclosed nerve center here at the ALA conference is award-winning author Karl Stewart. His latest book is The Green Light, big award at the Hollywood Book Festival. Congratulations. Welcome to the program.
Well, thanks for having me, Burke. I'm glad to be here.
It's good to have you back. You are a previous guest on the podcast, but not in this circumstance when you are surrounded by thousands of authors and agents and publishers. How does it make you feel to be an award-winning part of this community?
Actually, I don't feel that I belong here.
Come on.
These people are busy. They're running around, they're doing everything, they're talking to everybody, and sometimes I just want a cup of coffee.
Listen, you are a pretty busy guy. I know that because you're a prolific writer.
Yeah, I do like to write.
The new book, The Green Light, the premise is what?
Okay, this is actually the first book I ever started writing.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
When I started writing. And I couldn't get it done, so I set it aside, went to another book, came back to it, set it aside. This is this current one that was published is actually the 7th draft. And I only sent it in probably at my wife's behest, who got tired of seeing me pull it out of a drawer and work on it for the last 12 years. The premise is, there's a young man, a college student, drops out of college in the late 1960s and ends up in the Green Berets. It's a strange connection, but it happens, and then he had to, being slated for Vietnam, end up doing a U-turn and was instead moved into the 7th Special Forces, which is the Western Hemisphere, Caribbean and South America, Bolivia, places like that. So the premise is this young man with really no military background at all being placed with a bunch of very hardcore, dedicated men and having to find his way with them.
Now, I've interviewed you on the podcast before. I know about your background, and you're very modest about it. You don't talk about it a lot, but you were a Green Beret. You were a Special Forces guy, and as a result of that, you suffered from some PTSD, and many things happened after that military career, and you became an award-winning writer. So I have to ask the question, how much of the book, The Green Light, is based on the real Karl Stewart?
That's what made it the hardest book I ever wrote.
Is that right? Okay.
Yes, because for one, I didn't have to do much research. I love to research. All my books are well researched.
Well, you researched it with real life then.
Yes, but this one, when you go through something and then you try to write about it, especially if there's parts that hurt, you want to gloss over, you want to make yourself look better than you were.
Right.
You want to improve history. And so I would find myself doing that, and then I would read it and trash it and start over again. That happened a number of times. Much of it is, well, the whole book is drawn from my personal experience. I didn't do one shred of authentic research for it. But I would say it's about 80% reality and 20% fudge.
Well, the fudge is what makes it a page-turner to a certain extent, right?
Exactly.
So, as I think about this book, and I really want to read it because I'm fascinated by your story, you are not, with no disrespect to our military, who I respect enormously, you're not the typical guy, the rah-rah, let's go. You are as far from that as possible. I don't want to call you a pacifist. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you are not the central casting former Green Beret.
No. Arnold Schwarzenegger or Rambo, those guys don't. Matter of fact, Rambo would have washed out of Special Forces. He would never have been accepted. Mentally unstable. There's too many psych tests for that.
Right.
But at the same time, you can find yourself in positions that you never planned for. I wanted to be in a thrilling outfit. I wanted to be somewhere where there was action.
Right.
I ended up working with the most dedicated, hardcore, committed men I ever knew in my life. I mean, Burke, these guys, Cuban refugees, they'd lost everything back home. They were willing to die. They were willing to go to the beaches. I mean, these were different. Many of them had college educations. I was certainly not the only one. Some of them had degrees. But they were committed, and we relied so much on each other. You have to in an A team. You have to have their backs. They have to have your back. And it's a brotherhood that's so close, it's closer probably than I am to my own brother.
What would surprise people when they read The Green Light about that Green Beret experience, that Special Forces experience that maybe is different, as you said, than Rambo that you see in the movies? What would surprise people?
I think the one thing they very seldom do is do investigations of what these people went through, how much they lost. When you see a war movie or a story of Cubans or Bolivians or wherever they are, there's always a superficiality that never scratches these people. But when you eat with them and talk with them and they tell you their jokes and you tell them yours and you sing together or you move together and you're constantly alert, not just for you, but for the man in front of you and the man right behind you, you bond. There's bonds.
I want to ask you about
that's not usually in the movies, the bonding.
You don't see that piece of it.
No.
I want to ask you about some of those guys that you did bond with. Talk to me about any of them that you have a very strong recollection of your time together.
I've been to no reunions. I've sent no letters, no contacts with anybody that I worked with in Special Forces. When I was out, I was out. I went back to civilian life. That's the hardest part of what I did. It wasn't weapons training, it wasn't jumping out of planes, it was the decision to break, to move on.
And that's the fascinating part to me about your story, because so many of those guys, I don't want to say live in the past, but that was the highlight of their life because it was so forming and making them the men that they are. And they carried that identity for the rest of their lives. You made a clean break.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was the only way. The longer I was in, the longer I was working with these people, the easier it became. It became easier and easier, and I could see myself moving in a direction that I wasn't sure I wanted to look at in 20 years. That's where it was, really. I was uncomfortable with the man I was becoming, or I thought I was. I was offered a position working in the Negev Desert, training Israeli paratroopers for the agency, 3 times the salary I was making in the Army. But that's somewhere I didn't want to go. Not the place. I didn't want to go there. So you have to decide somewhere, and that's really the big decision in the book. Do I stay or do I go? Do I build on this and create this man, this warrior, or do I go into civilian life and make a life there? Can I do that? Am I even capable of doing that anymore? And the longer I walked the military path, the deeper I went into being somebody I was extraordinarily uncomfortable with being. It was very easy.
When you look back on it now, with the advantage of hindsight, did you make the right decision?
Yes, absolutely. It was 100% the right decision, although at the time when the re-enlistment officer said, "You'll never make it out there. They're crazies out there. The crazies run the world now." And I thought, no, that's really not true. And that I wouldn't make it out there was a challenge. And I always felt that I could take a challenge and move it forward. And that was he convinced me to step out without knowing it. He was trying to convince me to stay in.
I want to ask you about something that may be difficult to talk about, but that is your struggle with PTSD after coming out of the military, after your special forces, after your time as Green Beret. Can you talk to me about that struggle?
Yes, that's been one of the most satisfying things.
Okay.
Oddly enough, you wouldn't think it would be, but it has been. I found that by finally writing this book and getting my wife's okay to send it in, she said, "It's good, send it in. Stop tearing it up." And when I sent it in, I felt like a weight. I really did. I mean, people speak about that metaphorically.
Right.
I felt a weight come off my shoulders because I had said things that I hadn't said before. I'm sharing things I'd never shared. It impressed me so much that I developed a program called Healing Through Storytelling, which is getting veterans who have had issues to write about it. I don't care whether I've talked to veterans groups, civic groups, if they can write a poem or a song like Barry Sadler did to handle his, or a short story, an essay, a recollection, anything. Start putting it down and then read those words about yourself out loud to yourself so you're not avoiding them. I found for me that was very healing, and I've talked to a number of veterans since then at different meetings who have said the same thing, and so I felt very satisfied with that. If it did nothing else, then put me in a position where I can help guys who are wounded, then it was really worth it. It was good.
I thought it was fascinating that you said, and I'll paraphrase for a minute, that one of the most difficult things for you to write this story was to not go back and polish it and make you look better than you were. And I wonder if you're happy with the end result now that you finally kicked it out after 7 drafts in how many years?
12.
12 years. Are you pleased with the end result?
The end result isn't the book. The end result is my relationships, my wife, my children, my grandchildren, my family. One of the problems with writing that book, honestly, was the fear that they would cast me out.
Right.
It isn't pretty. It wasn't a nice story. It wasn't me being heroic. It was different than that. And the fear of that, and then having them read it, and my wife say, "This is good," meant the world. That was huge. That was satisfying. Being able to open that up and find that's okay. It wasn't the worst. And when I tell soldiers that, or veterans that, it's okay. Talk about it. Tell your wife. Tell your children. It's an incredible relief. That was the most satisfying thing about writing the book, Bert.
I'm excited to read it. The Green Light is the latest from my friend Karl Stewart. It's an award winner at the Hollywood Book Festival. Available now at headlinebooks.com. Great independent bookstores everywhere. And your website again is?
karlstewart.net. That's a K with Karl and .net. I have had contacts with people call me up and say, "I went to your website and all I got was hockey, because there's a Karl Stewart.
Whole different guy.
Whole different guy with a C. And he plays
KarlStewart.net with a K. Karl with a K. Hey, thanks, and best of luck with the book, and best of luck with everything.
Thank you. Thank you, Burke. It's wonderful to be able to talk about these things. Appreciate your time.
You bet. It may sound like a cliche, but it's not, and I thank you for your service.
Thank you.
That's Karl Stewart. The book is The Green Light. We're live at the American Library Association's annual conference and exhibition in Chicago. Thank you for being a part of our Big Time Talker podcast. Thanks to our show sponsor, SpeakerMatch.com. New episodes uploaded everywhere, every Tuesday. I'm Burke Allen in Chicago. Thanks for listening. Now go and make it a great day. Bye, everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you.